We now return to our Inara Commander series with Mack Winston, Season 2, Episode 9, The Fraud of Damocles. William F. McCoy, Cassie L. Pea Station, Tanmark. Done with all our transportation jobs for the day, which had surprisingly gone without incident, we'd parked up to get some rest. We had been supporting the move into Tanmark, so it seemed like the natural place to put down for the night. A transport job had rudely interrupted Cal's storytelling, but now that was done, I felt I ought to get the rest of it out of him before he changed his mind. I don't know why you'd think I'd throw you out for what you did. It's all in the past, and to be honest, it sounded like your family put you in an impossible situation, I began as we sank into the comfortable leather seats in the living quarters of our Imperial Clipper. Cal winced.
That's because we've not got to the really juicy bits yet.
I gave him a sideways glance. Juicy bits?
Remember how I was telling you that I was destitute? And then somehow I seem to have 8 million credits to buy 50% of that Type 7 with you.
I thought for a brief moment. From nothing to 8 million credits. That couldn't have been legitimate. Cal nodded and lapsed into silence. Gonna tell me about it?
Okay. Imagine this. You're stuck in Thessalia with no money, but because you were the deal maker for your family's company, you have a bit of negotiating skill, and all the time in the world to think of schemes. And then one day, without warning, all of a sudden the East India Company shows up with huge numbers. Ships everywhere. The docking bay frantic with all activity, all sorts of hangers-on turning up the works.
I thought back. Yeah, we had established a new trade route, and like locusts, EIC contract ships swarmed Thosiao, Tawilo, Yunga, every system within a dozen light years with something to trade. Some very profitable shipping routes had opened up thanks to a few changes of government, and we took advantage of it while it lasted. Cal continued.
By then, I was living in the hostel on Del Parte Market. It was cheap, not very cheerful, and a group of unsavory characters were living there long term. Where you get trade, you get thieves and pirates. So I was stuck in this place with a group that called itself the Delport Freedom Gang.
Yeah, I think they attacked me once on a trade run.
And I had to practically live with these people. It wasn't much fun, and they kind of like to push me around, so I didn't spend much time in the hostel. Instead, I wandered the station. I noticed that there's one East India Company pilot that seems to like to finish his day at Delport Market. One of the few EIC guys in a smaller ship, single crew. I saw him nursing a beer almost every night at Rotterdam's.
Cal looked at me expectantly, but I gave nothing away. It was obvious he was talking about me, but I thought I'd let him continue. I thought back to that day, just 18 months or so ago. Rotterdam's, Delport Market, Thosiao, March 3301. It had been a rough trip. I had been attacked 3 times on the way to the station in a supposedly safe system. I had dropped a full load of metals off at Foster Orbital, then a hold full of agricultural machinery to go to Delport, orbiting a world turned over to agriculture. I really needed something a bit stronger than a beer this time. Rotterdam's was just another nondescript bar and yet another station along my trade route. I almost always went there. It seemed the place for lonely pilots to go. There were always a dozen or so of us, sitting on our own, nursing a beer, being perfectly antisocial. Not the usual picture that a bar owner would like to paint of the most happening social experience this side of Akinar. Suddenly, a voice beside me got my attention.
It looks like you've had a hard day,
said the man beside me. He was of slight build with a strong Akinarian accent, with short spiked black hair and that Sino-European complexion that seemed to be common in the Empire. The stranger seemed pleased to see me. This wasn't something I was accustomed to. Yeah, you could say that. The Internal Security Service leaves something to be desired around here.
Don't say that too loud,
he said, looking around.
I'm Callum, by the way. You can just call me Cal.
Mack Winston.
You're with the EIC, aren't you? You all seem to have turned up in force recently.
Yeah, we do that sort of thing. The trade's good here at the moment.
What do you fly?
Asp Explorer called the Virtuous Misfortune, but I'm looking for something bigger for trade. She's got great jump range, but she's not really built for trade, but right now I need another beer. What'll you have?
Mine's a black.
I was glad for the company, really. I was never particularly sociable, but I'd been flying nearly every waking hour and hadn't spoken to another human being properly for some time. Cal turned out to be a resident of the station and seemed easygoing and quite happy to hear endless tales of long trade runs. The beer kept flowing, and before I knew it, I was, to put it mildly, hammered.
I started following your ship, making sure I was at Rotterdam's whenever you finished for the day, trying to build your trust and hoping to hatch a plan which the EIC could unwittingly help. Really, I just wanted to get out of Thessaio, but I could get in with an EIC contract pilot, where life would improve immeasurably. I just needed a plan.
Well, you did that all right.
But the plan kind of found me. With the EIC swarming the place, it was attracting attention, including from Vasquez Entertainment, and duly someone turned up, but not my brother, Enrique. He preferred to stay at home and act as the Lord, sending others to do his bidding. When I did the job, I would always go personally to find new business contacts. I made a point of doing so, but not Enrique. He sent out his new slave. After all, they had to replace me, to make new contacts with suppliers. For years, my family have wanted to land a contract with the East India Company, and undoubtedly, that's why this guy was here. And so the fraud began.
Cal paused his story, reaching for the liquor cabinet.
Whiskey?
Yeah, why not? Cal poured out 2 tumblers of Aranin Pearl whiskey, my only indulgence from my home system. I took a sip. It lit a path of fire down my throat, which subsided into a satisfying, smooth warmth.
So I decided to ingratiate myself with the Delport Freedom Gang, as they might turn out to be useful. I practically lived with them in that hostel after all. They had half a dozen ships, perhaps there were 20 of them, led by this really nasty piece of work called Davil. I had the foresight to never have given them my real name, though they thought I was a guy called Kevin Johnson.
Imaginative name.
I had to think of that at the spur of the moment. But Davil was actually quite well educated when he found out I didn't know how to handle a firearm, because my family considered firearms beneath them and had me do archery. He nicknamed me Legolas.
Who?
A character from the classics. Legolas was an elven archer of some repute, but that's not really important. The rest of his crew laughed at me for my utter lack of firearms knowledge. Davil, on the other hand, knew how a modern crossbow could mess someone up. Not only that, disassembled, it would easily pass through the firearm scanners that dotted the station. His attitude changed towards me. He realized I might be very useful to him, and I might be able to get rid of some of his rivals at the station. The prospect terrified me, but having his trust was useful.
You? An assassin?
Nah, it never got that far. But with all the time in the world to think, I came up with a very reckless plan that needed Davil's trust.
Cal gulped down the rest of his whiskey.
So the East India Company was in Thessaio. So was my family, angling for business with them. And I was gaining the trust of a small band of criminals, and at the same time, becoming your closest friend. I carefully cultivated these relationships over the next couple of months. It was at this point I had to strike. I told you that I was wrapping up some business, and then I would have enough money to go 50% on a Lacon Type 7 with you. Of course, you didn't hesitate for a second to agree. Meanwhile, I was convincing the Delport Freedom Gang that I could get 8 million credits out of Vasquez Entertainment. I got them to trust that I had inside knowledge of how they worked, and that we'd be able to con them out of a lot of money.
And how?
The Delport Freedom Gang would become the East India Company's operations office in Thessaio.
Jesus H. Christ on a sidecar. You pulled that off?
With your help, yes.
My help?
Yeah. All I had to do was get you drunk, and you tell me everything. You showed me how the EIC works with contract pilots like you. You showed me the paperwork in your datapad. Everything. I made lots of notes over a couple of months. You even showed me some of the internal promotional guff about the EIC missions office in Hosqueno. If loose lips sink ships, well, you single-handedly sunk the whole fleet.
I flushed red at my own indiscretions and stammered a weak excuse.
So Delport Freedom made a nice facsimile of an EIC mission office. I guided Enrique's slave in without him knowing it, and Davil, who's a surprisingly good actor it turns out, played the part of a local EIC deputy absolutely flawlessly. We presented an investment opportunity to build a full-scale trade clearinghouse in the sale, with the promise of entertainment contracts as a sweetener. Just invest 8 million credits. At least a 7% return on investment.
Surely your brother would check.
You'd think. I would have checked. I might have resented having to work for the family for free, but when I was doing the job, well, especially with anything new, I would go over everything with a damned microscope. But Enrique, he cared more about protocol for protocol's sake. He would say that good chaps don't check up on good chaps or some other such bull. He was also so desperate to get in with the EIC, he wouldn't tell anyone else in the family until he could go home triumphant, contract in hand. So no one would get to sound a voice of caution either.
Surely your gang noted the family resemblance when Enrique turned up? I mean, I could pretty easily tell he was your brother.
Nah, he was going through his beard and bleached hair phase. He thought it was stylish. He looked like a right bell end. I think some old aristocrat must have quietly taken him aside and told him this. That's why he wasn't like that anymore at the Ascension ceremony.
But the accounts and security certificates.
This is where Enrique really fell down. There's any number of shady notaries who can do a certificate. I had linked an account called the East India Company Investment Fund to my bank account, except the letter O was from the Cyrillic alphabet. The security certificate signed by the Imperial Notary. Well, the last L in Imperial was a number 1. Literally the oldest trick in the book, and Enrique fell for it. I was pretty confident he would too. I was more worried about his lawyer. When it was my job, I'd go over that stuff like my life depended on it. And I'd be especially suspicious if a certificate only signed a few days earlier.
What about Enrique? He couldn't see you, of course.
He dealt with Davil. Fortunately, Davil's your size, so your jacket fitted him.
What?
Remember you lost your EIC jacket and cap?
You stole it, I exclaimed. I wondered how it had gone missing for 2 weeks and then suddenly it reappeared.
I gave it back,
Cal said with a cheeky smile. He seemed to be enjoying telling his story now.
So, anyway, Enrique and this lawyer showed up. We also got the lawyer on our side to make it look right, and to Enrique, it looked all above board. Davil did a really good job fooling Enrique's lawyer, too. I watched this all from the other room, half filled with excitement, half filled with terror. Davil didn't realize that the fake EIC account was actually linked to my bank, not the gang's. There was also another minor complication. A real EIC crew turned up thinking it was a new missions office, right when Enrique and the lawyer showed up for their appointment. A bloody anaconda crew. I thought it was going to all be over, but it turned out to be highly fortuitous. We sent them on a long-range delivery mission with a bunch of stolen weapons that the Freedom Gang had stored, and to Enrique and his lawyer, it made this EIC office look absolutely genuine. Your explanation of how the missions office worked had been perfect, and the Anaconda crew were completely fooled. Even the lawyer's guard was down after that.
So they paid?
Yeah. They made their investment. Meanwhile, I sent you a message saying my business was done and we'd meet up in the docking bay. And I just hoped you'd be on time. It wouldn't take long for Davil to smell a rat and come looking for me once the deal was done. Fortunately, you showed up slightly early, and we hightailed it over to Shinrata.
I let this all slowly sink in. The audacity of it all. Impersonating the EIC to the point of actually sending an EIC anaconda on a mission to keep up appearances, forging accounts, defrauding a nasty little pirate gang. The sheer audacity. You realize if the EIC finds out what you did.
Yeah,
Cal said, becoming more serious.
I know you can turn me in. and it would be entirely rational for you to do so. You'd be protecting yourself if you did.
I paused and let the statement linger for a bit. I ain't gonna do that, Cal, but, well, I can't help thinking this whole thing is going to hang over us like the sword of Damocles.
The fraud of Damocles, at least.
I laughed at the pun, and I could see Cal had relaxed a little. A new question. So, what happened to the Delport Freedom Gang?
Ah, of course. Enrique found out he'd been bilked out of all that money within days. I have to imagine he was utterly humiliated, coming back home with this investment in some EIC enterprise, crowing to everyone about his success, and then finding out it was all a big con job. I couldn't inquire too closely, I didn't want to give the game away. But it seems like he paid a lot of money to some internal security service pilots to annihilate the Delport Freedom Gang. Meanwhile, the gang were busy looking for me, of course, since I had defrauded them too. Remember that time we got attacked, leaving Webport in 34 Benghazi?
How could I forget? It's permanently etched into my brain.
That was them. They even yelled my false name over the comms.
The attack had nearly cost us our Type 7. I had to fly that box with wings through the station structure like it was an eagle, desperately trying to charge the frameshift drive.
But looking at news reports, the pilots my brother hired caught up with pretty much all of them.
Pretty much?
Yeah. I didn't see any news about Davil, but the news can be a bit vague. I have to imagine they got him first. But you never can be entirely sure, and well, now you know why I kept steering you away from the sale.
And your family? I'm guessing they never made the link to you?
Never. I think Enrique would have had that whole instantaneous swarming with police if he did, rather than just having Murdoch go look for me with the hope of merely causing us some humiliation.
I think I need another whiskey. Make it a triple, I said, passing my glass over.